In the spring of 2021, the children of Shipley School went on a walk around their parish, and they were particularly interested to visit the remains of a Second World War bunker. And in this film you'll see shots of the bunker and hear descriptions of its history.
The focus of our walk is all about the sounds of the South Downs, and one of the things we need to do is to stand very still and listen to see what sounds we can hear in the background, in the foreground. So if we stand very, very still, what sounds can we hear of the locality?
You can hear the wind.
You can hear the wind rustling the leaves, can't you? Yeah. Joseph? Anything else? Rachel? Anyone hear another noise in the distance?
Water.
See if you can locate where we are.
We're here. I found it.
I think we're going.
Yeah, that's the lake. That's the lake. Yeah, that's there.
Would you call it a lake?
No, it's
A pond. A pond, yeah, maybe. We want to
go that way.
Along that way.
Yeah, we go down that way. We will. But we're by the lake. We have to go up, and when we go up, we go into a part of the ditch where we can find this secret bunker and its ruins.
You know when I come around? Hey man, I've run.
When I come around here,
Oh, you know.
Where does this path end?
well, it's all in a.
My name's Ian. I would describe myself as an amateur historian. I live in the village and I'm just very interested in the local history. So I'll start straight away by talking about this hole here. This is actually the main entrance, or was the main entrance, and here's a plan of what the bunker would have looked like. So we are here. This entrance here would have been covered by a hatch which would have been invisible from the outside. You wouldn't have known it was there if you were walking past on this footpath. There would have been a ladder inside there, which would then take you through a little tunnel into this entrance here. There was a hidden latch on the shelving, which if you knew where it was, you could then open that door and you could move into the next room. Do you want to walk up and follow me through as I talk about it? Put them in group. So I'll talk you through it first, and then we'll do the walks. Okay. So this room here would have been the main operational area, and it would have contained bunks for people to sleep in. A radio. The radio was probably the most important part of this station, and the radio needed a number of things. So it needed batteries, and in those days, 1941 we're talking about, batteries were a lot bigger than they are now. They were more like car batteries, but they were rechargeable. So there was also a generator. I'm not certain whether it was a petrol powered generator, but I suspect it was probably a hand cranked generator. That would have probably taken quite some time.
But it would keep you warm.
Would keep you warm, yes. And the aerial for this radio would have been high up in the branches of this tree, and it would have basically, it was a directional area. It would have been pointed in the direction of the control station that it was communicating with. And that was a special, in order to put that in the tree, that was a special job which was done by a special group of people, engineers. And in addition to sealing the aerial in the tree, the aerial needed to be fed with a signal which went up a cable, and that cable was called a feeder cable, and that went up this tree. And when you come round the other side, you'll see there's a scar up this tree, because the cable was made to be invisible, and I'll explain how they did that. So it must have taken a lot of skill and time to do this, because somebody channeled out some of this bark and very carefully preserved it all the way up the tree, and then underneath the bark in the wood they carved another channel, and in that channel they put the feeder cable, and then they took the original bark and glued it back over the top, so the cable was completely invisible, and the aerial itself was concealed as well. I don't have any pictures of that, and I don't know how they did it, but it was made as camouflaged as possible. So just putting the aerial and the cable in the tree, but there is a scar, and it's round this side. You'll see the scar when you come past. So inside here we had the radio, and they would have also had some food and provisions. There was a chemical toilet, because obviously if you're going to be there for a long time. But behind this toilet there was an emergency escape tunnel. So the reason for that was, if you got discovered, you'd probably be discovered at this end. So you'd hear people coming to get you. The first thing they'd have to do is figure out how to get through the shelving, and while they were busy doing that, you could be escaping behind the toilet through this tunnel. And that tunnel comes out in that field over there. It's about 30 feet away.
Yeah. And this tree wasn't here in the forest, isn't it? The tree is not there. Yeah. So this tree has grown there
Since that was built.
Yeah.
And that's what might have caused the damage.
No, so you might know what transistor. Have you heard of a transistor power?
Yeah.
Go round a bit this way, Joseph.
Actually, the people at Coolham Airfield probably didn't even know about it, because it was actually top secret. It was not meant to be spoken about. Only a few people knew. Some of the locals knew about it, the local kids. I wouldn't recommend trying to go in there, but it comes out somewhere in that field. I've never looked for it, and maybe you guys will at some point, but I think I can see it from here.
I think the chemical toilet would have been there, I think. And then all the radios and stuff.
It was effectively an underground Nissan hut, if you know what a Nissan hut is. So, concrete base, concrete walls, wooden door frames. There was some shelving on that wall there, and on that wall there was a light switch. I know this because it's a standard design, and there are other Zero stations which are still intact, and you can see those details on them, and you can see that they look exactly the same as this one. Radio. There was also a telephone line fed here as well, because the disadvantage of a radio is that you can reveal your presence if you're using a transmitter. Telephone line, it can be traced, but it's much harder.
And how many people would have been in here?
Well, I believe this one was manned by 3 women, if you can say manned by 3 women. But had we actually been invaded, then those women would have been replaced with, I would call them guerrillas. So they would have been trained commandos, basically, and their job would have been to disrupt the invading forces as much as possible. Whereas what the women were doing was espionage. They were effectively spying, and they would report anything suspicious or any activity out of the ordinary. If a person came in, wandered through the village who was a stranger, they would report all of that information to a central control point, and then that would have been analysed by specialists who would determine whether it was perhaps German spies, spying on the area, seeing what was going on. So it was actually very important. The work they were doing was very important. But in England, I understand that there's about 32 that are known.
That's all. So this is pretty significant.
These are very rare. They're a rare find, because a lot of the ones that are known they're not accessible. They've completely collapsed, and people know where they are, but they've not actually found them.
Okay, girls, can you pretend you're sitting listening to a radio or something like that? Yeah, don't touch it.
Oh, well, I would estimate that from the top of that curve,
Right, so where is Willie? Oh, that's lovely. So we're going to say huge thank you to Ian. Will you say 1, 2, 3? Thank you. And Mrs. West, who's taking us for us. Thank you, Mrs. West.
I got my map and I got it. I've got everything in my book.
No jumping.
Mad the way we copy American.
Round here, so I'll see if you see. Yeah, he was a poet. He wrote some short stories. He did lots of lovely things. So he was an MP as well. He was a very busy man. And where did he live? When he was here, when he was alive. Yeah.
Didn't he live in a wing?
Not in the windmill, I don't think. Was it? So where do you think he lived?
In a house beside the windmill.
It's very close. Yes, you're right. It's across. The house at the back here, isn't it? Where he used to live. And there's a lot of the house is still originally there as he had it.
And I wondered what people here thought was most interesting. What did you enjoy particularly about today? Yes.
Probably how big the bunker was, because I thought it would be a lot smaller than that.
Yeah, I thought that. I was surprised how big it was. Did anyone have any thoughts about what it'd be like living in it? Go on.
Probably quite cold and quite wet, maybe, like a bit damp in there.
Yeah, it certainly would be now, wouldn't it? And does anyone know what the Second World War was? Why the bunker was built?
In case the Nazis invaded.
Nazis, yes. So they were the political party that ran Germany then. They were very warlike. So they'd have been very brave people who were down in that bunker. And the other thing I was going to ask you is, as we walked around, Mrs. Harvey was saying listen out for things. What do you think we heard today that you wouldn't have heard 100 years ago? Yes.
Cars?
Cars, yes. And did you notice how it got louder as you got nearer the road? That sort of proves my point. You wouldn't have got a car 100 years ago. What were you going to say about horses?
You wouldn't get cars, but you would get carriages and horses.
You would. So it would have been a noise, but it would have been a different noise. It would have been the click-clop of the horses' hooves and the sound of the wheels of the carriages.
I really enjoyed there's the scar up the tree that I saw.
Yes.
Yeah. I was quite I thought it was going to be on the other side that we saw, but to hide it would be quite clever to do it on the other side.
Incredibly clever.
I was really interested in the scar as well, because I've been down there multiple times, but I've never noticed it.
Right, yeah.
How many of you do you think will bring your parents down here or your families down here for a walk? Some of you, if you want to take your maps home today, you can take them home and you can see your families.
So most of you don't live in Shipley?
I live
You used to.
Me too.
So dial post. I know someone said Ashington. You were Ashington. Storrington. So do you think 100, 150 years ago, if the village children were here, do you think I'd have got a different answer to that question? What do you think the answer would have been?
Shipley, mostly.
Mostly Shipley, yes. And why do you think that would have been the case?
Because the school's really close.
Yeah, the school's close, and so there've been a lot of children at the school 150 years ago who were all local. Now, some of you came from Storrington, some of you came from Ashington. What was the problem of being 150 years ago? Yes.
It would be that there were no cars.
Yes. And so, how do you think children got everywhere in those days?
They would have to walk.
Yes, they walked. Only wealthy children would go in a carriage, and even the men, even the grown-ups, would have walked everywhere, every day, lots and lots of miles. I come to school here, and why do you like Shipley?
I like Shipley because it's in the countryside and it's a small school, so you get to know everyone.
Yes.
I like Shipley because there's loads of country walks around here, and also we look after our equipment very well.
Good.
To each other, don't we?
Yeah, one last comment then. Yes, you again.
Probably because there's so much nature around here and so much greenery, and everyone's so nice in Shipley.